Well, I can only imagine what you have said during to the last few weeks. It's been an interesting week, a conversation around the country around some very compelling issues, from security challenges to the issues that pertain to human rights activists and the voice that really matters and the responses they've also received from government, from various people, and also from citizens. Are we really pushing arguments to make a difference at this time? And are those arguments really impacting how the society reframes itself on the feedback of the people? Well, we're about to find out. This is Say No Campaign. Welcome to the program today. I am Femi D. Amelem. Today, we would take a good look at the discussion around human rights activists. It's more than the ordinary day when Nigerians will feel and describe the measure of pain or the displeasure they do have regarding issues that really affects them. Things are turning out different. People are having opinions. They're doing much more than having opinions. They're finding ways to express those opinions. But at the same time, the government is also pushing back as regards how far is your freedom of expression and how well can you grant this freedom of expression. I'm joined by an elite journalist today. He's a writer, a human rights activist, a lecturer, and is the publisher of Sahara Reporters. Omoyele Sowore is with me today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for bringing me.
We're glad you're here. So let's go back because sometimes conversations that have to do with human rights, that have to do with activism, often really lie in how the history around it is made. You guys have a compelling history when it comes to activism, and it's one of the fundamental things that have reformed their democracy. Nigeria also has a trend of activism even from way, way back. But the big question is, has activism, one way or the other, reflected or reformed the Nigerian society, especially when you look at how it started through the likes of the Abacha years, the military regime, and the likes of it. What's the work with activism so far in Nigeria so far?
Uh, you have to think about activism from different dimensions. There are people who fought for democracy in this country, and it is a truism that is democracy today. If those guys, including myself, when I was in the university, the likes of Gani Fawehinmi, Femi Falana, Beko Ransom Kuti, Integrity Fela Nicola Kuti, Wole Soyinka, countless others who staked their lives, who took big risk to take on well-armed military jackpots in this country. We will still probably be under some form of military dictatorship today, just as Saudi Arabia is still saddled with a monarchy, just as Equatorial Guinea is still saddled with the same leader for over 35 years,
Yes,
just as Zimbabwe was saddled with the same president until last year.
recently.
And just so that I bring it closer to home, that even as recently as 2015 in Abuja, I had to lead some kind of media struggle against Zimbabwe's longtime leader, Robert
Robert
Mugabe,
Mugabe.
during President Buhari's inauguration in Abuja. To confront him and ask him the question, when are you relinquishing power? When are we coming to your own country to have an inauguration of another president? I'm just making this historical link, and so that because a lot of problems that we have in understanding the role activism has played in this country has to do completely with situational memory. Our memory is getting smaller and smaller. It is now reduced to 140 characters, 50 seconds videos, and also just a little bit of all of it is modeled up. So we don't even remember our heroes anymore. We don't know the young people that died for democracy in this country because our new heroes are on Twitter, unfortunately. So just to let you know that we've come a long way, but we have made a fundamental mistake, and I'll say this: we're not documenting, our struggles. If you go to the U.S. today, you find nothing less than 50 books written about Martin Luther King. You find same number of books about Malcolm X. You find same number of movies, biopics, literature, all kinds of poetry, rap music, you know, all kinds of documentation, historical, literary, uh, documentation in all kinds of formats. So you can actually go somewhere and read about them and get inspired. In Nigeria, you can't find it. They don't even teach history anymore in our schools. And if they did, the people who would be in charge of the history books are the same reactionaries who have always let Nigeria down. So you understand why people don't see activism from the point of, oh, they saved us, or nobody can actually count how big activism had helped us to be where we are today. But it's a wide range of activism, and activism has always helped Nigeria. It will always help society. But again, each time we are doing it, we have a duty to record and document what activists are doing, so that's to inspire others. I can imagine if I had a chance today to contribute to a movie about my life at the University of Lagos, which was a very short period, but very, very monumental activism took place.
That's 92 to 94.
Yes, between, within campus and outside campus. Some of them were international. We're making contribution to struggles, even in other places, elsewhere. As young as I am, I was part of people who also fought towards the end of apartheid from the student movement in Nigeria. But you can't find it anywhere, and the newspapers also don't keep libraries that can tell the stories of our activism. But just in a nutshell, it's important to know that if at all there's any modicum of decency in our society today, I say modicum, is because of these activists who have taken on the system and spoken truth to power and fought physically against oppressive power.
So we have a wave of generation of activists during your time, and something was almost exclusive to every one of the people who went for, especially in the 90s. I would like to go with the 90s. I know there were some others that did reign before then. Taking you as an example, it was about the IMF loan at some point, and reducing the number of schools from 27 to 5 at universities.
They were trying to reduce Nigerian universities because the IMF said you have too many universities. The IMF is always against things that work for ordinary people. And the IMF is not here. I call them the international monetary fraud. They're not here to save Nigeria. They're here to provide, to enlarge the market for their Western owners. That is why the IMF does not intervene inside of the US or in the UK.
Makes reports
about them. I've been in the US for 19 years. There are parts of the US that are poorer than neighborhoods in Abuja. So if the IMF wants to save the world, they should have given loan to the US government to go and also take care of those people. But the IMF guys are not here to help you. They're here to expand the markets for their industries. They're here to provide employment for their own people. They are here to recolonize us.
And get contracts.
And, give you loans that you don't need, and the interest rates will just be building up. And then once in a while, they'll send somebody here who looks like us or one of our sisters or brothers to come and say, oh, if we can follow all the IMF rules, we'll be fine by now. But there is actually a study somewhere, and I cannot confirm categorically, this was Shion Kuti who was saying as we're discussing, that even if we follow all of their prescriptions, we will not be like them in 300 years. So why waste your time? But what I know about economics, what I know about international travel, the little exposure I have is that all the prescriptions they give you cannot work. So they are not for you.
They're not for you. And oftentimes, just talking about IMF now tells me that there are government organizations, there are non-government organizations, there are international organizations who prefer solutions to the state of things because they know citizens would buy into anything that would look like a saving grace at any point in time. Absolutely. But as an activist, way back then, the names you mentioned earlier, the Wole Soyinka and so a few other people you mentioned who really had something to push, they did have this sense of individuality as regards what is the cost to follow through at this time. Now, I'm asking you because even decades after now, there is really no generation, apart from the social, the digital warriors now, that is taking on the same level of activism with such conviction, with no price tag to say, okay, they offer them something, they will back down. Why is that so? Do you think two generations ago or decades ago, you failed or the system failed in handing over what it takes to be a good activist down? Because one would have thought, for example, with the Bring Back Our Girls, somebody such as Obieze Kwesile would have had somebody younger, somebody fresh, somebody closer to being a youth leading the charge. But here we are having to go by every activist that matters has to be somewhere from the generation of Gani Fawehinmi making the difference. Why are there no fresh voices?
You cannot blame the Gani Fawehinmi, the Wole Soyinka, the Falanas for that. I went out of my way to become an activist by ensuring that wherever I hear that they are coming to campus, I would abandon class and go listen to them.
Geography class, precisely.
Yes, I was in geography, and my parents weren't expecting me to go and fight for anybody. They just wanted me to go to school, come back, and join the government or find a job somewhere. My specialization was actually groundwater hydrology, and I was supposed to be a regional planner, providing water to regions of Nigeria, and that was what my parents were looking forward to. Until I met Falana, and he spoke, and I just decided from that night that oh, Nigeria is something we have to really, really fight against. And I mean, the leaders then, not Nigeria as a nation, but the leaders at that time. So we found out that the guys who were taught in history classes in primary school, we had to fight against them when we got to the university. They were actually the ones destroying the country. And I don't have time to mention all of their names now. They were the ones getting the national awards, they were the ones getting the contracts, they were the ones just decimating the system. But what happened, which is important, mentioning why young people want instant gratification before they fight now, there was a commoditization of activism when activism became something that was funded. It became a funding issue. So you find a lot of people became activists not because they had personal convictions, not because they learned from somebody or they were part of any underground movement anywhere, but because funding was coming in certain direction and funding certain things. And when the funders feel like, they are tired of one sector, they will go to another sector, and the activists will go and, develop another proposal in that sector. So you saw a lot of people who became activists because there was money involved in it, and the activists became the neck upon which the corrupt political class were now revolving. I'll give you an example. There are so many times we've written reports, corruption reports, that some activists or journalists will be the first to call on behalf of the corrupt guys. They're not denying that the guys are corrupt or that you're right or wrong, but they're saying, it's my friend now, please, how can you help him kind of situation? So that's a problem. And there's no conscious effort, and part of it is not the fault of the young people. It's that when one of the things they did was to hijack the educational institutions where the activism was rampant and very, very strong and focused, they took them over. And part of how they took them over was introducing cultism on campuses. Cultists were ravaging universities, if towards the end of the mid-90s. In fact, I was attacked by cults. Yes. I had to fight the cult guys because I knew they were children.
Even though you also been accused of being a cult member.
They've accused me of everything since I was born, but I've never been a cult member. I don't believe in cultism. I was openly against the government. I was unarmed, so I believe in what I was doing. It would be a denigration of my personal conviction to now be part of another secret society that is running after girls and trying to rape people when I'm trying to save society. You understand? There was no meeting point between me and court. The only organization that I joined at that time was the Guys Club because it was fun. And later I heard even the Guys Club became almost immersed in cultism and integrated in something. It was a shame. But by the time I left campus, we fought so hard that the cult guys could not harm a single person. We fought them. But the year I left the University of Lagos, it's on record. They were killing themselves like flies on campus. So, and the government then used the opportunity to bring in security agents, police, and then they started determining who became student union presidents and leaders. And of course, when you have that, you are going to have a generation of student activists who just didn't get their acts right. There was no foundation to their activism. And so there was a year when I went back to University of Lagos. I met the student union president 5 generations after me. He had a personal assistant. And I was asking him, what are you doing with a personal assistant? Oh, he has several special advisors. They were now mimicking the same corrupt system. So it's very dangerous at times if you're an activist or if you have a society where activists are aspiring to become the oppressors. They want to drive the same big cars. They want to, buy private jets. You find NAS president inside the presidential jet. and you take photographs, selfie with it. You know, they're flying them up and down. Who do you think? Where do you think their
The
loyalty
funding
will
is
be?
coming from.
And then they destroyed NANS. There are probably two versions of NANS now, but almost all the versions are working for government. It used to be a crime, you know, quote and unquote, to be seen in the office of a governor. Or we were government ourselves, so we formed parallel governments on campuses, and we were waging war against these corrupt guys on the outside. That is no longer happening today, and that's why I'm saying is the commoditization of activism
Activism.
that destroyed that culture of personal conviction. So anybody that you see today as an activist is asking, one, they want to go on vacation. You can't go on vacation if you're an activist. You know, they want to travel abroad and attend conferences. There's nothing wrong with it. You know, in fact, the U.S., black nationalist movements did not have very strong impact in the U.S. until they started connecting with other African activists. You know, the pre-independent and post-independent leadership. So I don't have anything against. I don't have anything against the exposure that they're putting themselves. But when it becomes the issue that every conference you go in, Addis Ababa, in London, it's the same activists that are there. I was like, what time do you? When would you have time to fight?
Yeah.
When you are jumping from one airplane to the other, and attending. Today you're attending HIV/AIDS. Tomorrow you're attending children issues. The other day you are a labor activist. And I see them. I said, probably as we are here, you are writing at your next proposal for another conference. Again, I have nothing against people traveling around, but it's just that you can't have them both ways.
The baseline is not there.
Yes.
So let's move in a little bit into what you do, because it would be nice to be able to talk about activism as regards to your activities now. In 2005, you decided to start Sahara Reporters. It became active in 2006. Much of the description is that you're in Manhattan, your room, and you decided to start Sahara Reporters. Even though by proxy, a lot of people think Sahara actually means that you fly away in the desert, you choose to do your media advocacy or citizen journalism way, way far from there. But your compelling objective, as much of what I recall, is the fact that you wanted a news media organization that would create storm. And many years after, you have held that storm up to a large extent in the most consistent way. However, there are many other versions. Professionally, the Sahara Reporters is seen as citizen journalism. That's your description. Some say you practice yellow journalism, sensational in all sense of it. Some others say you actually provide those articles to the best bids. And much of what you provide is that much of the funding for your organization has come from some few international organizations and committed Nigerians who decide to blow the whistle regarding some of those stories that you do have. But when you do put out your reports on Sahara Reporters, the big question comes about, how do we verify this? Because much of it is the fact that it creates a storm. Nobody sees what will be left after the storm. People often want to wonder about the verification of some of those stories, especially when it's put in the perspective that this is activism. This is written with the perspective of an action should be taken afterwards.
That's right. And I don't pay too much attention. I don't pay mind to people who criticize our modalities. It's expected. You know, when we started, I wanted to challenge the traditional media to do what they claim was professional, right? And it was because there was no professionals. I've not met any Nigerian that thinks that the big guys in the big newsrooms are doing professional media. I mean, it's NTA professional, it's Radio Nigeria professional. These guys just wake up in the morning, they lie to you from night till evening until you close. The same thing was repeating itself in the newspapers. The dailies were just outrightly serving the interests of their different owners.
We're partisan.
Not only were they partisan, they were serving, they were clearly, they didn't hide it. They were owned by thieves, you know. They were their proprietors. And everybody knew that. So for example, James Ibori had Daily Independent. He was undergoing trial, he was stealing money from Delta State to pay his workers. There's no journalist in the place that had the audacity to confront him. So what we came out was to start confronting everybody, including the media, and they didn't like it. So most of the things we are talking about came from the criticism you are repeating here, came from that. Then you move on to another area, which is not great. This is black and white verification. I ask people, I've probably done 5,000 stories since 2006. And I can give you categorically some of the biggest stories. One of it is, of course, Yaradua's sickness, right?
Yes.
One of it is Stella Odua's BMW issue. One of it is Desiane. One of it is, James Ibori, Bukola Saraki, Lucky Igbinen. I can be counting. In fact, we, Sahara, we're almost responsible for all the governors that were taken to court by Nuhu Ribadu in 2007 because they came from a lot of the investigative reporting we did of their properties abroad. They just yanked them off, add them to the local investigations, and they took them to court. So people don't give us credit for this. These things have not only been verified by us, it's been verified by court decisions, pronouncements. It's been verified by the police, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. They've been verified at all levels. But yet, people will ask you, how do you verify the story? It's just like asking me to tell you the secret of how I get the story. I can deal with that. But all of this, most of the stories we have done, as I've mentioned to you, including when Jonathan's wife was sick and they were lying that she was okay, and she came and said she died several times, including when President Buhari started hiding his sickness, and we told you that he'll be gone for 4 months. Right, all these things we can verify.
It's played out.
It's so the verification. I think the problem is that the way we write, the context we write, people just can't believe that some of the things we are saying can become true, because as if there's some kind of clairvoyance to how we write, that we are predicting and prophesizing to the future, which is not true. We gather information in unusual ways. We talk to people at all levels. We don't disregard information. And we keep finding more information. And when we start a story, sometimes on Twitter, it will go to the length of verifying itself, right? Of course, all of this truth we put out must go through the 3 stages, according to one German philosopher, that at first it will be ridiculed, secondly it will be violently attacked, and finally it will become self-evident. We are an evidence-based platform. It's on Sahara that you could have seen senators sleeping with 2 girls, and we'll give you the video. You've never seen that before, right? That's verified, right? You see checks stolen by a governor, we say this is a check. When Obasanjo went and collected 7 billion or so from Delta, claiming that he had a contract with them to put a poultry in Delta.
Yes.
We brought out the checks. I'm just giving you some of these instances so that you can disabuse your mind and purge yourself of this whole notion that somehow we write from the moon or the blues. No, all these things are there. You see, there's an indexing of all of our stories. You can Google any of our stories. It may take a while. The latest I can give you is that when Buhari took his son by air ambulance to Germany 2 weeks ago or a week ago, we reported it. No Nigerian media had the guts to repeat that. The Nigerian media were reporting that the guy has been discharged, but he's in Germany as we speak. So, how do you verify that? It's up to you. But it's verifiable because there's a jet that took him. You can even track the jet on your own on the internet for free. And we mentioned the hospital. These things are there. The doctor who is treating him, the doctor that accompanied. We mentioned all of that. But sometimes people just feel like these guys are just too much, right? And every day we keep breaking that barrier, sound, speed of news. We started from just writing reports to become a breaking news platform, in addition to writing very in-depth investigative reports and putting forms and formats behind it and pushing them out. And of course, forcing people to act. Right?
Now, which brings me to the next part of the question.
And that one is contextual. The reason people act is that there's a context that we write our stories. That's a reflection of what our people want to. Because don't forget that our sources are regular citizens. So if they're angry, we put an angry context in the story so that people can be sufficiently angered enough to act to better their lives. Because at the end of it, what is journalism if you keep writing acres and acres of stories and the society is...
I like when you say acres.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move from there, because what you've achieved in journalism is also translating into not just being described as citizen journalists now. I mean, it's one of the only media in Nigeria. I don't know if you best describe yourself as media in Nigeria because a lot of people still want to see you as international based. But then a lot of people depend on your stories, read some of your stories, and create some level of activism on social media to say, this is what I read. I know it will be verified with time. People can put up debates and arguments as regard what I have read.
Yes.
Now, of good interest is the fact that a lot of young people are on social media. The millennials are on social media. That's the point of activism.
Yes.
Have you tried, or do you think your platform is able to use some sort of model to guide their thinking? They're not on ground like the era before, where it was more physical, where somebody responsible could be jailed. This time around, the best you can have is somebody's Twitter account, and if the government feels compelled or boxed into a corner, they go in search of the person and actually get the person arrested.
Yeah.
And unlike your days where you were beaten and the likes of it, and sometimes put on the security list or travel manifest and all the other things that do come into play.
Look, I've been arrested and detained in different parts of Nigeria 8 different times.
Yes.
So this is not new to me.
It's not new.
Yes. So, but you can just land as a
Yeah. So the spin-off is the fact that you have a followership you cannot count as regards people who start to think and who start to gravitate towards some level of activism with no care for what would happen. Sometimes their points are factual, some other time it's just about the context of the anger that they do have. You just mentioned the fact that you make people to feel the anger of the originators of this story.
Yes.
So how does that help activism? Do you think you're able to model or guide the conversation?
I mean, as much as the only reason we are complaining about activism now is that we want to see more. Actually, there's a lot of activism happening. It's only that they may not be exactly, because over time our problems have also mutated in different directions. So we needed more people doing different things, but we also need frequency. We need authenticity. We need more audacity, right? And consistency. That's what's the reason why we are complaining about lack of enough activism. It's not as if activism. Most of our stories have generated debates, not only on the streets. It's led to fisticuffs inside the the Nigerian Nigerian National Assembly, right? It's led to discussions, shouting match inside even the Aso Rock Villa. And these things are well known. It's led ministers to put up Sahara Reporters report and say, look, this is what they are saying, or and things like these are things that happened under Jonathan, it happened under Obasanjo, it happened under Yaradua, it's happening to Buhari now. Don't forget, as part of some of this loose talk you hear that when Jonathan was leaving, they said, we're working for Buhari. But again, if people had institutional memory, they would know that it was us that fought the Yaradua about making it possible for Jonathan to become the president of Nigeria, acting first, and then he became substantive president in an election a few months later. But nobody gives us credit for that, And when Buhari came and started misbehaving, we have gone after them with even more ferocity. Most of these blabbers that you hear now out there, they are using the stories that were written as the basis for fighting against the government. When you hear, Buhari's people are doing round tripping, we're the ones who reported that they are doing round tripping now, right? When you hear that there's nepotism, it was us that started the story about nepotism through the central bank hiring that we exposed, that they are just hiring their children. And we provided the evidence, listed who were hired and which of their children were hired, or wards or kids. So that is the way the system works. Of course, people are never satisfied getting enough. But what I wanted to respond to what you said is the issue of engagement. You see, the way people interact and engage with news when they read from us is different from the way they engage with news elsewhere.
Platforms.
Because we're out there, we have organic followers. When you say organic, almost 99% of people you see on our on our social media platforms are real people. We don't buy followers. So, and when there's need for outrage, you get organic outrage as well. The real people will respond. So and on our level, in our ways, we also engage in activism too. We put our boots on the ground. You've heard about me going to protest, in New York and elsewhere, and encouraging others to
To do the
protest
same.
against the system. So, but we cannot force people, at all times to do what would I wish that they could do. That's up to them, and that's where it becomes a little difficult. But when I speak to some of these issues, I make it very clear that social media is not enough, all right? Because at the end, it's a switch, and somebody can turn it off whenever they want if they are not happy or this is part of the problem.
Yeah. Somebody probably is trying to give you some good
Exactly.
reviews.
So yeah, which happens at all times, and you have to stay wired. So, but again, I hope I'm answering your question adequately. But the reason that you see all of these people being all over the place is that yes, there hasn't been one central way of guiding ourselves to solving all of our problems, and we need to keep doing more of that. We need more engagement, interaction. We need synergy, and we need collaboration.
So I'm thinking about the engagement, and of course, we are saying no campaign pretty much. And I feel with your engagement, a lot of people are saying no to some of the order of the day.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting to define corruption along two channels now. Not defining, but define it along two channels now.
Yes.
There's a channel where one would describe the corruption cases that are being examined, identified by the sitting government at the time, where they will mention some of the people from the past administration who have one way or the other participated or, well, said to have participated in corruption issues. And then there's the issue of corruption internally within the government on ground. Today the FCC picked up Babache David Lawa to answer questions regarding, the
grass
grass
cutting
cutting
scandal,
scandal and the likes of it. Let's come down to corruption cases. Is it an issue of they're fighting well or not fighting well enough? And I'm referring to the government now, because at some point when they started off with the issue of fighting corruption, especially for the people involved who were not close enough within their proxy, who were best identified as political opponents, and fighting corruption with neighbor, or should I say somebody who is pretty much close to you, it looks like the approach is different. What's your reflection of the fight of the government in
First, let me
corruption?
answer one quick question that you asked that I didn't get to. The next last question about people saying that we're on the take, we write for people. The reason people say that is they are talking about what they will do if they were in our shoes.
Okay.
That they will collect money, they'll be rich.
So you run a non-corrupt organization.
Of course, they know that. They know that I cannot be bribed. I cannot be bowed to anybody. I do not negotiate with people.
Why can't you be bribed?
Is because
usually they say every man has a price.
I don't have a price, and they know it. All of them know it. If I had a price, I would have retired a long time ago and built a mansion in front of the Atlantic Ocean, just chilling.
That sounds like a good offer you have.
Exactly. So some of the bloggers that came after me, who started their blogs, who have bought houses in Banana Island and things like that. So if I was that rich, probably I would be one of the people who is the richest in this country, and I mean it. They've tried everything they can to give me very, very huge sums of money. Not only to kill stories, but sometimes they just don't want you to mention their names. Just
out
leave me out
in case
of.
I come into the.
Sometimes they come back and say, "Can you help me take down the story you wrote about me?" And a lot of these bloggers and websites do it. They remove stories for a fee. Sometimes huge amount of money, but we don't partake in that. They know that. It's the reason why they're just throwing more than hoping that something will stick. But that's expected. But again, now going to your
corruption cases,
is that one thing that's very clear about this government is incompetence. This definitely is one of Nigeria's most incompetent governments that I've seen in my lifetime. And as I'm sitting here with you, I've been through about 7 presidents, starting with You know, in my active life, starting with Babangida, you know, I'm not talking about Shagari when I was little and Buhari first time. We started with Babangida. Babangida was sufficiently conscious and knowledgeable about governance then. And even those ones have been more competent than what I've. So it's not as if there's that they're not fighting corruption. Of course, they're trying to fight corruption, but corruption fighting doesn't start with arrest, detention alone. It has to do with prosecution. So the incompetence of the government is not only reflected in how poor they are prosecuting sometimes. It also has to do with how they fail to surgically clean up the judiciary that would have done us a favor. So you ask yourself, how does a James Ibori get he scaled through Nigerian courts. He was discharged and acquitted of all 170 counts, and he gets to London and they were able to jail him in just 3. You know, that's competence right there, and non-interference and judiciary that's doing its job. All right. Till today, they are making sure they are working to seize every dime that he has stolen. That's that right. But here, we can't even do that because the judges are working for the corrupt people. Almost all of them. Almost all of the judges, maybe a few of them are good. In fact, if a judge is very active and very courageous, you have to be wondering where that courage is coming from. Maybe he's also being blackmailed quietly for his. But I haven't seen too many of them. And we could have done that. Buhari could have come in and cleaned up the judiciary. It was very easy. All these judges they have dossiers that they could have used to take them out of the system. And infuse new judges that would help us make sure that these guys are expeditiously tried and sent to jail. Ojus or Kalu, for example, has been undergoing trials since 2007. A lot of them.
And he switched parties.
And now he switched party. And the other day, he's with the president of Nigeria while on trial for corruption. An anti-corruption president is having dinner with a guy who his government is trying for corruption. You see the contradiction. And again, we can't just waste too much time on that.
So, but I'm also interested in the fact of, I mean, you're talking about the prosecution. That means they picked up somebody, the case is being filed, they count them in. But even selecting or discovering which case to go after, do you think there's selective?
Let me tell you something. I don't know why we waste our time on this selectivity. All I want to know if a guy is corrupt, if a guy is arrested, is there evidence that he's corrupt? All over the world, governments have been selective in trying. In fact, crime and the trial of people for crime is done as a deterrence, right, to prevent others. Each time you find that a murderer has been arrested, there are probably 10 others that are gone scot-free or have not been detected because the police is incapable of arresting every murder suspect out there. So if we can prove that somebody has stolen, the selectivity of the arrest, detention, and trial, that one is for discussion on the other side. Every government will be selective. There's no question about it. When Clinton was president of the U.S., he pardoned his brother who was convicted of a drug crime. You know, when Donald Trump came to power, he's going after Bill Clinton and his wife because they have to selectively fight their enemies. So, but the thing is for the courts to decide if those who are selected for or targeted have actually committed a crime. If I'll be worried if they are going after innocent people, but going by what I know, I guarantee you that these guys are not innocent. These guys are claiming that they have been selectively targeted.
Okay, so
they're not innocent.
I understand that because for the external ones, the ones who are not close associates, but the ones who are close associates, that is almost difficult not to have an argument about. I mean, I could put in names here that
Why not?
who are close associates here,
let's discuss
because
that.
they're allegedly, and I'll use allegedly because I'm positioning
Yeah.
myself with some point of neutrality.
Yeah.
Allegedly, names such as Rotimi Amechi, much of his record, even the governor that took over from him,
Yes.
is still alleging that some of the handing over notes and finance of the state it was not well documented. I could go on to mention some few other names.
Let's speak on Rotimi Amechi,
Yes,
for
okay.
example, which is great. I've said it and I'll repeat it again. The state has a judiciary, the federal has a judiciary. Rotimi Amechi can actually be tried within the River State judiciary for corruption. You know, this lousy man in the kid has just done it to fire me. You know, yes, fire. So there are actually tools within the state. If Wike is serious, he can ban Rotimi Amechi too. They can prepare charges and file in their own court and let Amechi be fighting to clear his name. So, but Wike will not do that because Wike is more interested in the razzmatazz involved in, is more political. If you have caught him, please, by every means, charge. If the EFCC doesn't want to do it, you can charge him at the state level. There's a state prosecution office in every state. In fact, states prosecute murder. They prosecute other offenses. Why can't they prosecute corruption? So that's my position. But the reason is that Wike himself is worse thief. Or if he's a thief, he probably trained under Amechi himself, and they know themselves very well. So they'll do a little bit of noise and then they'll hide. They're not serious. If they are serious, there are tools at the state level to prosecute people like Amechi.
Somebody as close as the
assuming the federal government, the minister of a state of the federal government don't have immunity. Only the president and the VP, governors and the deputy governors have immunity. So I don't see the excuse. They've done it to fire me in Ekiti. So why can't they do it in Rivers?
Okay, so that's at the state level. But let's talk at those who are, even if there's a kitchen cabinet who are really cooking what happens in Nigeria. For example, the former SGF, he stayed on despite the fact that the high-level delegate of the people who investigated him, including the vice president, said, oh yes, he's indicted, and acting on that report took some time. The NIA boss, I could go on to mention, and these are people that may not have antecedents within the state judiciary to go after them.
Yeah, but you know also that all these people you are mentioning probably you read from us, right? And it's up to citizens to push. The reason why the NIA boss has not been arrested was because the DGSS went and interrupted the EFCC. Only an incompetent government would have allowed that to happen for two of his agencies to be fighting.
But that has come up so often
this last few days. So do you blame me for that? No, you blame the government. I'm not in the government. I'm not here to defend the government. I'm just saying that incompetence and internal criminality in the government is so rampant and obvious that the solution is for us to come out and fight against it. And that's why I'm in favor of physical activism as opposed to Twitter. Because Twitter is chatter, if something is not trending, people move on to that. And the government is very patient, They know that after a while, your attention will cool off. And we'll be discussing other things, sometimes very relevant things, right?
So it brings forward the question of, for example, now that we know that, okay, some people could be internally selected for
I'm putting that out that for me, I don't care
so
if someone is corrupt, yes. But again, it's up to us as citizens to make sure that nobody is shielded, there are no secret cows, right? Again, that's why I recommend physical activism, because we could have shut down this government to make sure that all of the bastards within it is pushed.
The anti-graft agencies, however, on the other hand, just taking a look at it, they are overwhelmed with a lot of cases.
It's absolutely, I say that all the time. You can't have an anti-graft agency that is so minimally protected, understaffed. Going after Senate President, his deputy, I can tell you categorically, as I'm sitting in your studio today, there are 13 senators that are ripe for arrest, prosecution, and should be in jail by 2019 if we have judges who can do it. But nobody can go near them because of political interference. The reason is that the president and his handlers don't want to hurt anybody because they want to run for office. You don't do that. In societies where things work, you don't even think about it. You don't go and the problem with the anti-graft agencies is that they have before they can act, and this is the truth, they have to get the consent of the president. They have to write through the chief of staff of the president and say, Mr. President, we want to go after this. If the president doesn't give a go ahead, they start doing, internet boys, people are stealing goods, yam. You see that the EFCC does that. That's the stopgap measure when they are waiting for
As
a
against
blessing. And that should not be the
high-profile
case.
performance.
Exactly. They have a lot of high profile cases that are ripe for action, but they can't because they are waiting for endorsement, they are waiting for validation and action from the president. And the president is not particularly, from what I heard, strong enough to, he doesn't read too much. And he relies on the chief of staff that all of us know to be very crooked. So it's a bad situation. Again, up to us.
So it brings forward the question of the leadership of some of these anti-graft agencies. Rogue leadership, some have described that as that belonging to Ibrahim Abu, that against all odds, against whether instructions are being waited for, whether the president approves or not approves, he appears to be a man who can go after certain kinds of people and only waits to leave out the repercussions of some of those moments in which he takes upon.
Yeah.
Do you validate his leadership? I mean, Nur Ribadu is somebody a lot of people talked about. Ibrahim Mago is waiting to be confirmed, but yet is quite active. Do you feel when you do stories, when stories do come up, when you create activism around such around certain cases, that the EFCC, under the leadership of Ibrahim Mago, is doing fairly well?
Oh, I agree. They are, of course, they have their own equivalences. Like I said, I've mentioned some of them, right? It's that the political will to do what they need to do is lacking at times because there's a disconnect between the president office where they need to go ahead all the time and their own ability to act.
Okay.
But we have a position at Sahara that supports anti-corruption. And if we find any anti-graft agency doing its work, even if it's in the police, we used to support the special fraud unit of the police.
You used to?
Well, because they are practically dead now. I don't know the last time you heard about them. They just use them for extortion now. But the EFCC is the only anti-graft agency that we've seen that demonstrated that they can actually strike fear in the heart of bad guys. And of course, the place is also reading with all kinds of problems of incompetence, even now of corruption. If you want to know how bad any agency is, just go to their car park. And you start, maybe it's a matter of time before some of them start driving to work in Bentleys. And these are guys that used to carpool.
If that's not happening already.
It is.
Yes.
I can tell you that there are some really bad guys in the FCC too. But Magu, as far as I know, has done a pretty good job. He could do better, but the kind of enemies he has, within the security forces, the National Assembly. It's a tough job. And there was John Gitogo in Kenya, who used to be an anti-corruption fighter, Caesar in the country, who said, if you are an anti-corruption executive and you finish your tenure, that means you have not done your job very well.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. But then the CSOs also have a role to play, especially when it comes to following up with some of the cases that may be running from time to time. I'm rounding off on this one, I'm thinking about the role of the CSOs because the Vice President, Professor Bajo, actually did call out CSOs about the lack of their duty or need to perform their duty. When it came to the report, he said they had not solicited or compelled the government of the day to follow through. It almost took the vice president to do that before there was some level of response.
I disagree with the vice president. I think that one is one of the things the government is well known for, buck passing. Why would you need CSO to make you do what is right? All the reports are first of all on their table, right? So the NIA report is on his table. He's the one who sat over it. Has he passed the report to the CSOs, even if surreptitiously, through the back channels? He hasn't. He's hiding it from them because you see there is some originality around when you have a secret document to work with. More people get angry, but when they sanitize it and call it a white paper, it has been whitewashed.
Oh, okay, maybe that's what that means.
Exactly.
So are you going to be interested in tracking a little bit of money movements as election builds up? Because in 2018 we can only imagine where
that's what we do a lot of. But we also need a very strong FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit, that because there's no money that moves around without paper trail, and most corrupt people don't like keeping money at home because they can't trust even their closest persons. And you know what they say about money in Yoruba? It says "anjanu." You know, if you keep money inside the house over a time, the thing will just fall out of the window.
It has a way of getting.
Yeah, it says money has a way of communicating his whereabouts as well. So as you know, after Jonathan left, they found money inside roofs. They found some of them dug inside the ground, soakaways and things like that. People just somebody knew that they were keeping money there. So the moment the opportunity came, they just told even the NIA money. This is the guys who used to help the woman carry the thing upstairs. Someone of them told me that they had to decide between going to rob the place or telling the government. So it was a whistleblower policy that made them change their mind. Otherwise, they wanted to rob the apartment and take as much as they can and just disappear. But the guy who did it now, courtesy of the whistleblower policy, has taken his own share and also disappeared.
Very well disguised.
And I hope he'll be gone for a long time.
I wish him the best in that regard.
On vacation.
It would almost be a failure on my part not to mention security situation in the country.
Yeah.
One of the biggest news in the last 1 week has been the fact that ISIL is making their way across the country, according to
ISIS.
Yeah. And
what the DSS said